Yeah.
I call this meeting to order.
So excuse the synchronization here, but we're playing because of what we thought would be a bandwidth issue, which we now know isn't, we're actually playing the sound from another laptop, picking it up on a speaker, and then I'm talking to you on a second laptop. So let's just see if this works. Here we go. And thank you for being here. So an important part of the committee mission statement when we moved from Harlow to Haddon was, and it's also part of our welcome pack, which several new members have had and seen, and the committee's certainly seen, was to improve the standard of photography for all our members and to provide an environment for photographers to flourish. And to date, we've focused very much on software. Chris's excellent lessons on a Tuesday, which if you haven't attended, I would really recommend. I think they're absolutely superb, and Chris puts a lot of time and effort into them.
Yeah.
Tuesday mornings wouldn't be the same without Chris or Jeff, who stood in for Chris this week. And beside having some award-winning photographers in the club, most of which are far better than me, we've also seen some fine professional work. We had David Newton, and most recently we had Verity, two superb evenings, both organised, if I'm not mistaken, by Chris. So thank you again. So we felt this is a good time to examine and discuss some advanced principles of photography and try to bring some further light on this fine art that I hope we all love. I decided, foolishly, that YouTube would be a really good starting point. I'm a YouTube fan. I'm a member. It's got thousands of tutorials, literally. And I was sure 2 months ago when this was agreed that I could unearth some treasures to help us on our way for this evening. That has proved somewhat problematic, not only from a technical perspective, bandwidth, etc., which Andrew was very helpful this week on, but by that stage I'd already written most of this, and also finding the right content. It's easy to just sit and watch a YouTube and think that's pretty good, or that's not that good, or that bit's good. But when you're actually going to present it to a load of serious photographers, you really start to question the content. So I've been following a guy called James Popsys, weird name, Popsys, who's got over 100,000 followers or subscribers, as they call it. And with the help of some of your images, which of course I've asked permission from, and if you haven't been asked permission, you know I'm not going to use them, and a sprinkling of mine, here goes. So before I kick off, being that I'm a member and on the committee, I'm not doing this as a talk. I'll be stopping every few minutes. Please leave your mics on. Just make sure there's no background noise or people won't hear what's going on. You'll be able to ask questions all the way through this. And let's just try and make this evening as collaborative as possible so that we have a sort of joint learning experience. So here goes. If you can't hear me, shout, but hopefully you shall. I've got a Bose speaker sitting by the laptop, and we are off.
Right, first tip I'm giving that I think is actually quite a good one is that
Can't hear it, Warren.
Always be to make photos that are about things rather than just of things, which is a bit of a strange thing to think about, and it's certainly not black and white. And I don't mean black and white in terms of photography, I mean black and white in terms of theory. There's a lot of grey in this. Basically, there's no hard and fast definition of what makes a photo of something or what makes a photo about something.
There's no video.
You should try and make photos more
Videos
about something than of something. I can see you looking at me thinking, what the hell's he going on about? If you've not seen me talk about this before, let me try and explain through photos. So this is a photo of Lake Bled. I think it's a photo of Lake Bled. And here is a photo about Lake Bled, or certainly more about Lake Bled than the other one. And what makes this photo more about Lake Bled is the fact that I feel like I'm in the middle of a story when I look at this image. So I get a sense that people visit this island. I get a sense that we're in like a calm, serene environment because there's a lovely reflection on the lake. I get the sense that I'm surrounded by trees because you can see branches in the corner of the frame. I get a sense of temperature because of the mist and the autumn leaves. And so in general, I think this does a much better job of being about something rather than just of something, which, as I said, I think is always the aim with photography. Another example, so this is an ice fisherman in Greenland, and I could have, for this photo, just gone right up tight to him and taken a photo, basically filled the frame with his body, and through doing that, tried to get lots of detail of the, I don't know, what's he using, to the spear thing to get through the ice. That could have been the aim with the photo, but by doing that, you wouldn't have got the sense of scale that you get by me standing much further back and including all of the ice that you see in this photo. And by doing that, you get much more of a sense of what is going on, what the scene is about, than if you just saw the fisherman. For example, you can see that there is no other person for miles around other than me taking the photo. But there's no people, there's no industry, and by showing that, you get a much better sense of, for example, what his life is like. And you wouldn't get that, like I said, if you framed it differently, if you just got a photo of him. And this, I think, is a photo about him. Similarly with this one from the same trip, this is dog sledding, as you can see. Now, if the whip wasn't included in this photo, then it would just be a photo of my feet and a person in front of me on a dog sled. By including the whip, you get a sense of urgency. You get the impression that this man maybe owns the dogs. You get the impression that maybe he's working. You get much more of a sense of what's going on in the frame just by including that whip. So yeah, having photos that are about things rather than just of things is a bit of a strange thing to wrap your head around, but it's certainly something good to aim for. Also,
Did everyone hear that?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
Is it clear? Yeah?
That's not clear.
Basically, I'm just showing you the stills. We're not playing the video because we were initially concerned about bandwidth and people looking at it at different machines and everything else. So everyone can hear everything, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a bit muffled.
Is it a bit muffled? I've got a very large loudspeaker sitting right next to the laptop. Is it muffled for everyone?
Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
fine for me.
Slightly.
Fine. I think perhaps it's
If
just
you
different
turn
people's
the
machines.
bass down,
I'll
that'll
just
make
move
it less
the-
muffled.
I'll just move the speaker slightly.
If you
and
can
let's move
turn
on.
the bass down, it'll be less muffled.
I can't, sadly, Andrew, thank you for that, but I can't actually do that on this speaker. I haven't got that sort of control.
Not even on the
So-
computer.
Sorry?
Not even on the
I
computer.
don't
It's
really
very
want to get
unusual.
involved in that in the middle of a demo. If I've moved the
Now
speaker.
we get the honest answer.
Right. Okay. I'll move on, yeah? Lovely. Here we go.
examples. So here's a photo from that same Greenland trip that was productive for the sake of this video. And as you can see, my friend Ulanak is walking towards this iceberg. Now, were he not there, the photo would be entirely different. I mean, it'd basically be a photo of an iceberg. But by putting him there, despite the fact that he is a tiny percentage of the overall frame, you get a much better sense of story. You start thinking to yourself, what on earth?
Sorry? Did someone ask something?
No, somebody coughed.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I'm completely deafened. So all I can hear is this speaker and nothing else. But there will be a break very shortly. Okay?
Yeah,
Here we go.
it is clearer, Warren.
Oh, good. Thank you, Heather.
Is he doing there? And that is the start of curiosity with an image. And it changes everything as soon as you have questions about an image. And just a little bit of seasoning, i.e. something small in the frame to make you question things, can do a photo of the world of good. Here's another example of it. Me in the Faroe Islands with my big orange jacket on. Again, on a tiny part of the frame, but you start thinking, oh, how on earth did he get there? Car and a bit of a walk is how I got there. It doesn't always have to be people. I mean, it works quite well with people in this sense. I mean, this is another one from Italy with Tom. And again, if I remove him, the photo's not the same. It's just a photo of a mountain. But as soon as you have a person there, you get a much better sense of adventure. Here's an example with some birds. So without these birds, this is just a photo of some mist and a nice lake on a winter's morning. With the birds, I think at least, you get a sense of story, again, despite the fact that they are a tiny percentage of the frame.
Good. That's the first little part. So everyone can hear, everyone can see, it's all okay, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Images are being
Yeah.
grabbed off of a video, obviously off of YouTube, so they may not be crystal clear, but they will get clearer, I can assure you. So he's talking about things, and please excuse me if I'm teaching you to, because obviously there's some very experienced photographers in the club, but we're trying to just sort of cover everything and everybody. And we will get onto some fairly technical stuff soon. He's talking about pictures of things and seasoning as a way of improving photography, and creating images that aren't just what we would call, I suppose, record shots, which you see all the time. You may come back from a trip and you may have 100 shots and you may delete 50, and you may have 40 record shots and 10 pieces of fine art. So I'm trying to move things away from record shots, as he was trying to explain. Now, a technique that he used, which in several of those shots is called, some of you may have heard of this, is called figure to ground, often shortened to figure ground. Has anyone ever heard of that term?
No.
No.
Figure
Figure to ground.
Figure to ground, yeah, figure to ground. And this technique adds, the figure doesn't have to be human, and the ground stands for background. And if you look it up in a dictionary, it's a very, I won't say well known, as none of you have heard of it, but it's a technique that you will see all of the time in many, many photos. You saw it there with the small man with the iceberg behind him. You saw that on the mountain, etc. And I'll show you a lot more examples. So this technique adds a strong focal point to the image, which obviously is relevant. The actual definition is an image where the subject is separated and clearly visible from the foreground and the background, which is a technique that you've all used, many of you, I've used. I've just given it a name, basically. So I can't stress the importance of, obviously with any image, of creating separation. There's nothing worse than seeing a subject and seeing a pole or a tree coming out their head or a branch going across them, or you need, and whether you create that in at the time of taking the image, or whether you create that in post-production, that separation is, in my mind, mission critical. Now, obviously, it's not as relevant in a landscape, but I'm not talking about landscape photography. So I can give you some other, these are my images, a few of these. And even though Alison, who's standing there in an archway underneath the V&A at Dundee, I would hope your eye goes to the subject, which is Alison. And I can give you another example where you have, and you'll often find with figure ground images or figure to ground, that the subject is dark against the light background or light against the dark background, but it's the separation and the clear identification of the subject, of the focal point, which is where figure ground comes in. And a last image there, even though blurred, obviously a skateboarder on the South Bank, you can clearly see what I'm trying to do. Very difficult, of course, with moving images. And now I'll move on to somebody who uses that technique really, really efficiently and effectively. His name's Cohen Jacobs. I think, Paul, you follow him as well. Superb photographer. Nearly, I would say 50 to 60% of his photos, he's using figure ground. I think he's got, I can't quite remember how many followers, but it's several thousand people following him. And images like this would have 1,000 faves. He's obviously quite renowned and a superb photographer. Here's another image. I love this effect where someone's walking through a doorway. You can see the shadow there, you know, of the person. And there is, even though it's a dark image, they're as clear as day. And then, and again, as I said, the figure doesn't have to be a human figure. It can be an animal. It could be anything. It could be an object. But this would also be defined as figure ground. And then I'll move on to somebody who I think is a master of this art, who I was introduced to about 8 months ago, a guy called Rui Paula. I think he lives in Lisbon. He's Portuguese, of course. I think he's quite elderly. And now you look at an image like that and you just think, oh my God, because even though the subject is minuscule, and I don't think you could use any other word than minuscule, my eye immediately looks for that subject. The lines are leading down towards him, the building, the whole perspective of the shot, and you immediately pick up this minuscule spot in the left-hand corner of the image. And this you've seen perhaps with other photographers, but Rui does it so well. Obviously, you can see there's separation between the man, his jacket, the trousers, and the surroundings. And obviously, I'm pretty sure that on a lot of these images, certainly with Cohen Jacobs, that's been enhanced in post-production. You know, you can clearly see that separation to the right of him, which is his left arm, and you can see how the wall sort of comes in, but unless you're looking very, very carefully, that just looks like a perfect image as far as I'm concerned. I don't know whether many of you sort of go on Flickr and hunt around Flickr and look. I don't get the impression, I know some of you do Instagram, some of you are Facebook, which I don't do either, as the committee know. But there's like 16 million images on Flickr. And for me, it's a real treasure trove of fine art. There's a lot of, excuse the term, crap, very poor amateur images. There's many outstanding photographers who are posting regularly, and they're well worth following. It's a big wide world. I do notice actually when many of you post your photos, even onto our website, you don't actually post it on any other groups within Flickr. And I think that's interesting because whenever I post an image, I post it on certain groups. People come back with feedback. I then look at their work, and it's a sort of interactive environment. It takes a long time to build up, but it really, really is very absorbing and you know, and very interesting. So is there any questions on, and I'd love to hear from other people. I've done enough talking. I'm exhausted already. I've only been talking for 15 minutes, if that. So is there any questions, anything anyone would like to add or join or say or collaborate or whatever?
How do you think that differs? So if you go back to the picture of the horse, how do you define that different from a picture of a horse as opposed to using the horse as your subject to ground?
How do I, that is quite a convoluted question, Chris.
Yeah, probably. But I mean, isn't it just the snap of a horse?
Yes, but look at the background. Look how it stands away from the background. That's the figure to ground.
Right.
Yes, it is a snap of a horse, but then you could in theory say that's a snap of a station doorway, or that's a snap of some sort of, not arches, but some sort of modern looking building. But it's what he wants you to, what the photographer, I don't use the word artist, or what the photographer wants you to look at and how he has emphasized that in all of these images.
The difference is, Warren, that
Yes.
horse is full in your face. The others are just little anecdotes added into the image just to give it a bit more interest.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
make it more appealing.
No, and I, it's funny because somebody said to me, I showed this to somebody else and they said you should show other things beyond people. I found the image of the horse and I thought to myself, is that actually real figure ground? And the actual definition is an image where the subject is separated and clearly visible from the foreground and the background. So as far as I'm aware, that picture of the horse would be separated from the background. There's been something done in post-production to the horse. You
Well,
can
I
see
mean,
that.
that's just a picture, a low
That
angle
horse is
shot
in the
of a
full-
wide angle lens of the horse.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I think it is. It's a low angle shot for horse. Whereas when you go to the other pictures,
Yeah.
like the people in the doorway,
Yeah.
they are not dominating the frame.
No, they're
Whereas
not.
the horse
and-
does dominate the frame.
Yeah, they're
Well,
access
there's
points.
no.
The other thing is,
Sorry.
the other thing is surely at the moment all the other pictures are actually contained within the picture, whereas the horse is actually contained within the sky.
They give. I would agree. I would agree with all of you until I spent quite a long time looking at definitions of figure ground, because I wanted to show you figure ground this evening, and looking at examples on photographic sites where they give you examples. And some of the images they give you, the subject is actually in your face. They almost fill the frame, but they're always defined from the fore and the background. But anyway, we can. I won't take the horse out, but I'm happy to agree, that it may or may not be figure ground. What I'm trying to show, and I'll go on to other things in a minute, is this effect of having your subject, which of course James did in some of the examples that he gave, with the man on the ice, with the very small figure, with the large sort of ice mountain behind, the man on the mountain. It's just a different way. But when you spend a lot of time looking at other people's images, which luckily or sadly I do, you do see a lot of this technique. It's very, very widely used. I find it pleasant. I mean, do you find it pleasant? Do you find it an interesting?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, the thing with the guy on the ice and those is basically what he's doing, because you know how big he is. It doesn't matter how small he is in the frame. You know roughly how big he is.
Yeah.
Within a few 6 inches or so, he's going to be around about 5'8" high, tall, that gives scale to the picture. The big ice flow behind him, big iceberg, that gives scale to that.
Absolutely. But this is. I don't know whether, and this was photographed by James. He's not using other people's work. And he's a very good photographer. He's got quite a lot of books out there. And as I said, a huge amount of following. Obviously it does give scale. And he says it adds seasoning. It gives a story. It gives a human interest. It gives a story. There's an intrigue. What's the guy doing there? Where is he going? Etc. etc. So it's moved it away from being a record shot, hasn't it? And as Graham said, sorry, I can't always see who's speaking. As Graham said, I think it was Graham.
Yeah, it was
It also gives perspective. So it's a very useful technique, and it's very widely used now. Very widely used indeed. Anybody else? Heather?
Yeah, don't you think though that it's basically going back to the old adage that we learned right from the start, is having a focal point.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Without
all
any
those
question.
images would have been, nice images, but they've got no focal point.
Absolutely. You're
Or
absolutely
even
right.
an interest point, something to a person has a degree of empathy. We can imagine ourselves as the person in the picture, or it being somebody we know, and it adds an element of empathy, I suppose, to it. Well,
How often, Heather, do you see landscape photos in particular where there is really nothing to focus on? Which I always think is
Around
poor.
most of the camera clubs, a hell of a lot.
Yeah. And the great shots, normally there is something to focus, whatever the subject, there is some, and I'm going to go on to street photography, which obviously there is always something to focus on. But with other types of work, it is, I mean, this shot here that I've taken with this man holding a baby that you can see, that I don't think that shot would have been as interesting with him, although a beautiful shot of water and rock and mist and everything else. I always think, sorry? Sorry, I didn't hear that. No. Sorry, I thought somebody said something. It just adds interest to the image. Shall I move on?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Or anybody else would like anything to say? Any of our newer members would like to add anything or ask anything or ask what the hell I'm talking about and where I'm going?
No, I'm with you.
No.
It's all good.
Hi, Lynn.
Yeah, it's all good. You
Yeah,
can
you're
carry
good.
any
Yeah.
question.
Lovely.
Thanks.
Please jump
So you
in.
can carry on, Warren.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right. Let's hope we get the speaker right. Let's hope we get the coordination right. Let's get up to,
I've got my
most
fingers
importantly,
crossed.
the right picture. There we go. Right. And that's the picture we're going to look at next.
Number 3 is how to take photos faster or to stop missing photos. Now, the photos that I've shown you so far, a lot of those I could have quite easily missed, to be honest. They were very split-second moments in time that I was just ready to take photos of. And all it takes in situations like that is a little bit of pre-planning to make sure that you and your camera are ready. So the most important thing is for you to be ready in situations like that. And what I try to do is anticipate. So quite often, for example, I will see the birds coming, for example. I'll see them in the distance and I'll think, oh no, I'm not ready to take a photo yet. And I'll try and track where in the sky they're going and I'll try and work out where they'll be in 20 seconds time when I am ready to take a photo, and I'll plan to get them in that 20 seconds time. A couple of examples of this. So this is the Matterhorn in Switzerland and some parachuters, paragliders. Don't know what they're called. Is that paragliding? Which one's the one where you're on like a motorized thing and you've got the triangle above you? It doesn't matter. I saw these two and thought, oh my word, I've missed them. And then I tracked them in the sky, worked out that I would be able to get a shot of them with the Matterhorn. It gave me time to work out my focal length and what my settings needed to be. And about 15 seconds after I saw them, I got a shot of them. Here's an example of a bloke on Newborough Beach in Wales. I spotted him down the beach and tried to work out where I'd be able to get a photo of him in 20, 30 seconds time. That gave me time to adjust my settings and to frame a composition. I waited for him to come into the frame. Bang. So yeah, as far as making sure that you don't miss many shots, anticipation is crucially important. I also use a custom setting, a custom profile in my camera that I can flick to where I know settings will broadly be what I'm after, and then I'll need to make fewer adjustments than I otherwise would in a setting that wasn't set up for that. So I think I mentioned in the video that I was talking about this in, but typically I'm at f4 in this custom profile, just because that's plenty bright enough and I'll know that I'll be able to get pretty much all of my subject, pretty much all of the time in focus. I'll have my shutter speed set to a 200th of a second, which is usually plenty fast enough to get even medium subjects sharp, and I'll be an auto ISO. Now, if I'm in really bright scenes, then a 200th of a second shutter speed sometimes won't be fast enough to get a properly exposed image. But if that's the case, all I need to do is make some quick adjustments on the back dial of my camera to bring down the exposure, quicken the shutter speed, and I'm good to go. That is a lot less adjustment than I'd otherwise have to make if I was just in aperture priority and I've been shooting something else previously. So having a custom profile set up on my camera for this is a really big deal that has helped me stop missing as many photos as I otherwise would.
Does anybody use custom settings on their camera?
No, I'm about to. It looks really good.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll show you some examples. I've been doing photography for nearly 40 years. It's hard to believe, but I only very recently.
Don't look old enough, Warren.
Thank you, Paul. I've only recently started using custom settings because I have a new camera body. I use the word camera rather than body. I'm not into longevity, and it has very, very good tracking, auto tracking, which made me think I should go out and take pictures of wildlife, which I, again, have very rarely done it at the zoo, but never done it actually in, and some of these images you've seen, and without custom settings, I could never have done it, which I'll explain in a minute. So all of these three images are thanks to fast tracking and a custom setting. This little fellow came straight at me. I mean, literally, I got to the side of the water and he just came straight at me. I just switched the camera onto C1, just the custom setting I had, which I'll go through in a minute, and I captured him. You know, the camera locked onto him, and I've got more than likely 15 shots of the bird, and they're all crystal clear, which I could never have done manually. It just wouldn't have. And I'll go on to how important custom settings are with street photography in a few moments. So what do you think the most important tool is for these shots with a custom setting? And this is really what you've got to get your head round if you're ever going to use custom settings. What am I going to prioritize?
Shutter.
Shutter speed. Exactly. Shutter speed for this type of work is absolutely the priority. So I created a custom setting for speed being the most important thing. I didn't want too high an ISO. Clarity, I didn't want loads of grain. I didn't want to, although I do use Topaz Denoise, I didn't want to necessarily fall back on that. I wanted to get, I've got a crop sensor, as most of you know, with an Olympus. Don't mention Olympus, I'm sure you've all heard. And for those that haven't, Olympus is being sold. So Olympus is actually going through a sale process. So you should get your support, they all say. How true that is, it's being sold to venture capitalists. So
I don't know about everybody else, but I'm getting an awful lot of crackling and rustling papers and moving and clicking.
That's me moving my, thank you, Heather. That's me moving my papers across the surface of the laptop.
Oh,
there you go.
Frantically muting people, the off chance it was them.
Yeah, I should mute myself. It would be much better.
Yeah, it'd be better for us.
It would be better. So it would give me too much grain. So trusting the auto tracking system on the camera, I used a shallow f-stop. I think it was f4 for these images. And then I had to put in and the thing to stress with custom settings is the camera works at default. So anything you might have set up for P or A or S or manual will have to be reset for the custom setting. As soon as you switch onto that custom setting, the camera acts completely dumb. And it's only the things that you have preset into that setting that are going to then work. I made a mistake of doing another custom setting and having manual focus set in. And every time I went onto it, I couldn't work out why I was getting manual focus. So it is absolutely essential that you sit down with pen and paper, you work out what it is you want to film, whatever type of subject it is, and you cover every single aspect of that type of shot. It then works absolutely beautifully. With some cameras, you can then save that to your laptop, your phone, so that should the camera have some sort of glitch, you won't lose all your custom settings. There's ways of certainly doing that with Olympus, and I'm sure there is with Canon and most other manufacturers. So for shooting the birds, I also put in exposure compensation, which is something else you can put into a custom setting. I use 1.4 because I, in my wisdom, worked out these birds would be either against water, bright light, or against the sky. And it was sadly on that particular day, not a particularly interesting sky, which is why I got marked down recently by one of our judges. And finally, the compromise. There has to be a compromise. You can't set everything. And the compromise was the ISO. But shooting wide and shooting in broad daylight, I assumed the ISO wouldn't be too high. I think these shots were taken at 1600. Whereas you'll see shots later that are taken at much higher ISO. But I don't think grain is a great advantage in wildlife shots. I may be wrong. Some of you are much better wildlife photographers than I am. But for me, I wanted to keep it relatively good. And with a crop sensor, 1600, 3200 really is your max. You can, on many cameras, put a control on the auto ISO. Something I didn't know until this week. You can set the lowest and the highest ISO that you want, and then the camera will literally work within those parameters. So I created this setting for a particular task. I use Pro Capture, which is the same as high-speed shooting or a high-speed burst or burst mode in most other manufacturers. And as I said, over 40 years, I've never tried it, and I was totally amazed at the results. Not with my photography, just with my ability to throw a switch, you know, on a camera that I may have been shooting chicks or something like that on the ground, throw a switch. I had a sight on top of the camera, which is very inexpensive. It's a laser sight, and you can literally hold the camera at arm's length, because obviously with this type of work, bringing a camera to your eye would just be mental. I mean, you'd just lose it completely. So holding the camera out, I mean, laser sights, they're called laser sights, they're under £100. You put them on your hot shoe, and I just held the camera out and I just started shooting. And these were the results, and these were the first results. So, you know, I haven't played massively with these images, and they're clean. I'm not saying they're great, but they're certainly clean. So it came in useful because, as I said, this little fella came straight at me. I got to the lake, I got my camera out, and this thing came flying, and I thought, that is an opportunity I really want to take. And you know, and I caught it. Any questions on that?
Warren, what you can do with when you're in a custom setting mode, you've still actually got full control over your aperture, your shutter speed, etc. And then, so basically, you can move, you can change those around as things are going on. But then, all you need to do is either switch your dial to something else and then come back to your custom setting, or turn the camera off, turn it back on again, and it will always revert to what you initially set.
With the Canon, you can have it. You can change all the settings, but as soon as you take the shot, it goes back to the original, or you can allow the adjustment to stay active.
My 5D never did. It always stayed where it was put, unless the camera. You know, if you had the time frame for turning it off, then it will turn off. And of course, when you press the shutter button,
no, there was a setting in the menus.
Yeah, I never found that on my.
They're all cameras are going to be different, aren't they?
Yes.
Different makes.
With the thing that I found frustrating, and I haven't done a lot of high speed work. I'm not a sports photographer. I'm not a wildlife photographer. Was losing the camera. Literally, if I did a burst of a minute or so and took 30 frames, it was right. I then went to use the camera for the next shot, and it was writing to card. And this is with USB 1. So I purchased at enormous cost. It's like 3 times the price, even a 32 gig. I purchased a USB 2, which was faster. And then talking to Chris, he said, why don't you just shoot a sort of double JPEG? Because I'm shooting to 2 cards, and I was shooting RAW to the primary card, JPEG fine to the second card. And Chris suggested
that was the trouble.
Sorry?
That's the trouble.
Yes.
If you're only writing to the second card,
if you just write into one card, then you would speed up as well. If you write JPEGs to both, you'd speed up.
Yes.
If you write JPEGs to one card, you'd speed up.
Yeah. Well, Warren, which Olympus have you got?
The OMD EM1 is a mouthful, Mark III.
The Mark III.
Yes.
Yeah, because I'm not sure whether that can write to the fast card in the second slot. I don't think it can.
No, the second slot only writes to
the slower SD card.
It will only take a USB 1.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to get too... But it is frustrating when you've shot 30, 40 frames of this little fella, and then you see something else, and your camera is just mullered for the next 2 or 3 minutes.
When I shoot sports, for instance, I always shoot JPEG.
Yes.
And that's, well, I mean, to be honest, I've not really done any with the Olympus yet, because we haven't had any sports since I bought it. But
it's all your fault.
Yeah. But with the Canon, I always, for sport, I always shot JPEG because of the speed issue.
Yeah, well, Chris, talking to Chris, which I do fairly regularly, Chris said just shoot double JPEG, which I've started doing, and it really does make a difference.
Well, what I also do, the other trick that I do is I only shoot to one card, but I have it on auto changeover, so that when the first card's full, it automatically switches to the second card, and even if that card is slower, which it was on the Canon, the second card you could actually physically feel the change in write speed.
Yes.
But what you then do is, if the action's continuing, you've still got a card that you're using, then once there's a break in the action, swap your primary card, which on the Canon was a compact flash.
Yeah.
Switch it back to compact flash and just use that second card as a buffer.
Yeah.
So that when, if you fill your card, you've still got some space to carry on.
Yes.
And once the action stops, change the main card, switch the camera back, and you're back on the fast card again.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Graham. Thank you. I mean, the days of needing to shoot, I mean, obviously professional photographers shoot to 2 cards, but you'd have to ask yourself the question, is it actually relevant? Because I don't know how many of you recently have had card failure, and I shouldn't say this, but I've never had a card fail on me. So, and that's over a very long period of time. Have any of you had card failure?
I once had a card that wouldn't let me write to it. I changed it, and then everything carried on normal.
Okay.
And when I got home, I just downloaded the images were on that card.
Yeah.
I've had about 6 cards fail.
Have you? What
Really?
make do you use, Andrew? Won't be using that make.
No specific make.
Not a specific make.
No.
No. A lot of people do say it is something that you should spend a little bit of money on with cards and get something of, because you can get cards that are, I mean, Jessop's do cards. I did have a failure actually on a Jessop's card, which was like three quid or something. But anyway, moving on.
I've certainly had PNY cards fail. I've had SanDisk cards fail. I've not yet had a Samsung card fail.
Really? I use SanDisk.
Yeah, I've had a number of SanDisk failures.
Yeah. I've got a variety of cards and never had a major failure. The only one was that hiccup.
Yeah.
And that's in all the time I've had digital.
Yeah. Sorry, Paul.
Quite careful when strong, because there's a lot
If you had a failure, did it actually fail on the burst, or did it actually fail just as a single shot?
Is that to Graham, David?
I think it is to Graham, isn't it?
Yeah, it is to Graham. Yeah, sorry.
What was that? If
it
fail on a burst,
fail on a burst,
single shot.
It just basically the card just locked up, and it said, to continue, reformat card. And I thought, well, I'm not doing that, so I took it out, put another card in, and away it went. So whether it was the camera or whether it was the card, to be honest, to this day I'm not sure, because after I'd downloaded the images, reformatted the card, and I've been using it ever since.
I just wondered whether it's the buffer doing it first of all that's false on the card, so it's starting to download. The buffer can't take it, and that mucks the card up. No,
it wasn't that. I was only shooting individual images at the time.
I'm going to move on, guys.
Yeah, so, carry on.
Yeah, okay. So another area where custom settings comes in very useful, unless you're going to be using several camera bodies, is street photography. And street photography is obviously relevant to the club and relevant to our next exhibition, which I'll again mention in a second. And it's a niche area I'm still trying to get traction in. It's a very, very difficult art form. It's very popular. There's lots of books on it, several of which I've purchased. So let's just look at 3 styles of street photography. And as many people know, we are coming up to an exhibition of this very shortly. So this is particularly relevant, and it's also relevant to custom shooting. particularly if you use my style of street photography, and there's many styles, of course, and mine certainly isn't the best, which is what I would call on the move. So you need to be fast, you need to be quick, you need to be intuitive, and that's the reason you need custom settings. So, and if any of you ever moan that you don't have many, excuse the Americanism, keepers when you come back from a shoot, then don't take up this style of photography. Because I reckon if I get 1 in 30 keepers, that's images that I'm going to actually bother downloading and do something with, that's pretty good. Because you could come back with 200 shots and have, if you're lucky, 5, 6, 7 shots. Because you have to relate to this. You're moving. You can't just stand there and stop in front of someone. They're moving, and normally they're moving towards you. So that's the setting we're talking about, as I call on the move. So let me just show you a few images. This is one of mine. These are my images. This one, you can see the child's foot is in the air. This was shot at 16,000ths of a second. It was shot from the chest. Most of my shooting, unlike Chris's, unlike Dave Hobbs, which I'll go on to later, my stuff is done in a, excuse the term, covert way, which of course, if you're in the street, you're in a public space, let me stress, is perfectly legal. You're allowed to take photographs of anything in a public space. You've got to have balls, you've got to have a bit of bravado. You could get fronted by people, but this is, as you all know, a very popular style of street photography. You can see the way he's looking at me, and I haven't done very much to this image, but you can see how frozen in time they are. He's looking at either my eyes or my camera. I couldn't quite, you know, I'm wearing the camera quite high on a short strap. I use the Leica for this, and I'm literally walking along, just pressing the shutter, pressing, which is why the keeper rate is so very, very low. And here's another one taken at the Notting Hill Carnival. Don't think the police would have been overly thrilled that I was photographing them, but I haven't used it for any public display except this one. And again, this was shot at 16,000ths of a second. And they're all moving, as you can see, and bar his hand, it's pretty sharp and it's pretty clear. And
they're so young as well.
They are, so yes, the one on the left is very young, isn't he?
Cool. Aren't they just?
Very, very young indeed.
One on the right's ogling you and all.
No, I'm not. I don't know actually. I mean, I'm looking.
Yeah, he's
at
looking
a large screen. I don't actually think I think they're looking beyond me at something that was going on behind me. This was the Notting Hill Carnival, so there was a lot of things going on.
You'll be on their webcams. You'll be on their webcams.
Sorry, Paul?
You'll be on their webcams.
Yes, but of course, I think Paul would agree. You're allowed to photograph them. There's no law against photographing any public servant in a public place.
Yeah.
But again, you've got to be cautious. I can remember once photographing, I saw some light coming through a window looked like a restaurant, and I shot through the window. And I couldn't actually, I mean, as many of you know, my eyes are not that good. I'm partially blind in my left eye. And I couldn't see it, and I'm colorblind, so that doesn't help either. And I couldn't see anybody in the restaurant. And there was a load of people in there, and I think they were doing drug deals. They weren't too happy about me. So you can't shoot into a building, but you can shoot out of a building, and you can certainly shoot anything you want in a public space. But I have to say, it is hard work. You need a passion for this type of photography. Sorry?
Yeah, so I was just thinking, you know, you're saying you wear the camera quite high up.
Yes.
Have you ever thought of having a trigger lead in your pocket, with your hand in your pocket, so that they don't see you with your hand on the camera?
What I've done, Heather, and it's not as effective. To be honest, funnily enough, when you're walking along and your camera is mid-chest, and you've got your hand on it, you're not sitting. I don't know if you can see me, but your finger's not just sitting on the shutter. You're just holding the camera. People are not very aware that, and I'm quite a tall guy, which doesn't make it, I think the smaller you are, the easier this is. I'm quite obvious in a crowd, but they don't really catch on to the fact you're taking pictures, because most people feel you're taking a picture when you lift the camera to your eye, because that's how most people take an image. So I've had very, very little problems on the street itself. Bullant, who's a friend of mine, who you saw his work a couple of months ago, who's a very, very good street photographer, he's never had a problem. So you just need to be, excuse the term because I'm not, brave enough to actually do it. But the chances of confrontation are very, very low. Very, very low. I mean, very low indeed. So the reason, and I'm harping back to custom settings, if you're using one body for everything, is, you know, if you were out there taking pictures of street furniture, cars, buildings, blah, 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 and suddenly there was an incident, or you saw a person approaching you coming down the pavement, and you think, God, I want to capture this person, you've got no chance of setting the camera up in a half a minute from taking pictures of a building to taking pictures like this. You would have to have them set up in a custom setting, or have a body, perhaps a small 28mm camera, have them in a separate body so that you can just lift that camera up or put that camera around your neck and just take the image. So that's where the idea of the custom setting basically comes in. So let me just, where am I? So is there any questions on this style of photography? Because I'm gonna go on to how I focus these images, because that is really challenging, as you can imagine. I'm moving, they're moving, or it's moving, everything's moving. You're shooting, you may be using a motor drive. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. You can't use tracking or autofocus, because obviously as an image comes close towards you, and you can see these guys are really close, the auto tracking wouldn't work. It would just go haywire. So you've got to use something called zone focusing, which I'm assuming some of you have heard of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody like to explain and give me a rest as to what zone focusing is?
It's pre-focusing. Oh, sorry.
Going to talk up, whoever's talking. I think it was you, Paul. Couldn't quite hear you.
Well, I think Heather just came in. Yeah, it's pre-focusing on a set distance ahead of you. So with these, you would only perhaps set it 3-4 feet, and leave it at that. Leave it on manual focus, and then set an aperture that is going to give you clear or clear enough images within that depth of field.
Absolutely bang
within
on.
that zone.
Yeah, and you would normally, for street photography, the minimum, you would not go beneath f8, because f8 with a wide angled lens, and of course most street photographers will use a 35mm or a 28mm prime lens. You'd very rarely use a zoom lens for this type of work. You haven't got the same control. So you would shoot at f8 or higher, f11, because you, as Paul said, you would need to ensure you've got that maximum focusing distance. Of course, those amongst us who go back longer than I do with photography, they would have used that technique. It was a very common, I mean, before autofocus, zone focusing was something that was used all the time. And people like Cartier-Bresson, who's the godfather of this type of work, it's the only way, he would say, of capturing that, what he called the decisive moment, which this is the decisive moment, that point of contact when you want to capture that image. You're going to get one chance. It's not like a landscape. It's not like architectural work. It's not like portraiture. You are going to get 1/100th or 1,000th of a second chance to get this image. You can't go back and say, excuse me, guys, could you just come at me again and I'll try this photo? So you get, and obviously, unlike my work, some street photography is amazing and people capture things, and it's always captured in that 1,000th of a second with this style of photography. So zone focusing isn't It's essential. There's no other way of doing it. And with older cameras or with some lenses, you can actually see what distances are covered by using a certain aperture. I can see that on the Leica. I'm not sure I can see it on the Olympus. So it actually shows you with the little sort of gauge on the front of the lens as to what your depth of field's going to be. And at f8, it's on a wide-angled lens. This is 28. You've got quite a lot of depth of field, which is really good. So, are there any questions on depth? Because we're getting slightly technical here, and I know there's some sort of photographers in the club that have less experience. Are there any questions on what we're talking about with depth of field and speed and
focal length?
Focal length, of course, 28mm, 35. Is there any questions at all? Please speak up if there is. No?
You have a hyperfocal length table that will give you what's in focus at certain apertures.
Yes. Oh, hello, David.
Hello, mate.
Hi, you're okay?
Good.
Please, you made it. Please, you made it. I'll carry on. So you're always working, as David intimated, within the parameters of the lens and the depth of field it's giving you. It's judging that distance, of course. It's pointless setting the camera from 2 feet to 8 foot and then taking an image of somebody who's 16 feet away. So this crunch point of when you know they're in this zone is a challenge in itself, because you're slightly intimidated by the people coming at you. You're moving, you try momentarily just to remain slightly still, and then you shoot the shot. And there's nothing clearer than that. I mean, that child is actually in mid-step and frozen. So you can see how totally relevant depth of field is in an image like that. That's completely clear all the way through, and the child is more than likely a good foot, 18 inches behind the father. So it just shows how important getting that judgment is. And that's why you take lots of images and come back with nothing. And remember, some people shoot from the hip, some people shoot from the chest. You need to practice a lot. If you're going to try this, get in the garden, get the camera in a place like that's comfortable, perhaps on your chest, go up towards a tree or an object and just start firing away and take notes. That's the only way you're going to sharpen your skill to get shots. It took me months to actually start to get shots with this sort of clarity. And of course you need nerve, quite a lot of nerve. So, and a large memory card. We were talking about memory cards, and I think memory cards are really relevant to this, because you are going to take a lot of images, that's for sure. And of course you'll need to preset exposure compensation, because if you just go out there and you shoot at 0, you're going to get a lot of very, very dark images. If you're shooting raw, you may be able to revive them in post, but if you're not shooting raw, you really need to give this 1.5, perhaps 2 stops. You can see with this image, and I haven't played with it very much, that background is a lot lighter than the foreground. So you need to put, and as I said before, the camera's stupid. You need to set every single parameter in that custom setting. It's totally unforgiving. So, and the last part of the triangle, of course, is, as we all know, or most of us know, is ISO. And again, you can use auto ISO. I've shot with the full frame camera at 32,000. Depends what you, grain and street photography come hand in hand. Street photographers love grain. It doesn't matter how much grain's in an image. It's not like the bird shots. These are clear. It's a good lens, but grain, and it was obviously a sunny day or a bright day, but it doesn't matter how dark it is, how much ISO you have to use, as long as you capture the image. That's the important thing with street photography. So that's the last part of the essential triangle.
Warren?
Yes.
Could you explain to some of our newer members, perhaps, you mentioned that you need to compensate by 1.5 stops.
Yes.
Do you want to explain whether that's up, plus or minus?
It would be, I would give me a rest, my dear friend and fellow committee member. Why don't you explain?
Oh, because I get very confused. I do it one way, it doesn't work, so I do it the other.
Well, it's not. It's normally, in most situations, it would be plus. So this would be plus 1.5. Minus, we've all used minus, but it's used on far less. So in an image like this, where the subject, it has a light background behind them, somebody standing in a field, particularly, which I've done a lot of, people standing in snow, a snow scene. You have to remember, as always, as we all know, cameras are stupid. You have to say to it, that person is at a different exposure level to the background, and the camera is going to aggregate the scene and think that everything is in. Now, you can use, obviously, a spot. You can use a spot or a small, depends on your camera, to then, go in on this guy's face, his flesh, his jacket, and you can expose just for that. But of course, in street photography, that's not possible. And also with the bird photography, it's not possible. So I would say, and please correct me as you are, and I like that. That's what discussion's about. In 8 cases out of 10, I think you're using plus. So each plus, each one is a stop. And therefore you need to think that through. And if anyone says, and I'm thinking, if you're shooting in RAW, it's slightly less relevant, because obviously the latitude that you have in post-production, thanks to people like Chris and Jeff and Paul who are helping us with things like that, in post-production in a RAW image, you've got a lot more latitude. I think you've got about 4 stops either way. With a JPEG, I think it's about 1.5. So if you're shooting JPEG, which people have been discussing earlier, you certainly need to make sure that you are getting that exposure correct. And again, the way to do that isn't to wait until there's a Notting Hill Carnival, is to just go walk down the street, and as somebody walks toward you, just shoot, just get out there and play with it. Just try it. And of course, the smaller the camera, the less obvious you are. And as I said, zooms don't really work that well in this environment, obviously. They do in some forms of street photography, which I'll go on to. Does that explain it, do you think, Heather, for our...
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Is there any questions from our newer members? Because that's who we want to hear from.
Oh, there was, but it goes... Oh, am I on? It goes way back.
You're on.
Yeah. You said about auto tracking and fast tracking.
Yes.
Not quite tracking. What's the tracking?
Right. Some depending on the camera and equipment that you've got, and we've all got different equipment, with auto tracking. So when you press the button, your camera will focus on whatever it is in the center of the screen, or if you're using point focus, wherever you've put that point. Yeah. So you lift your camera up, you half press the button, and it focuses. Is that right with your camera?
Yeah.
Right. With auto tracking, which is a setting on a lot of cameras, you pick up the camera, you press the button, and it basically locks on the subject. And if the subject then moves, however quickly, depending on the quality of the camera, across the screen, out the screen, it tracks that movement without you having to do anything. So it's called, you'd see it in your manual if your camera's got it, it's called auto tracking. And for work like the bird, it's very, very important. For work like this, it's totally irrelevant because you're using this zone focusing, so you're not tracking at all. So it's basically auto focusing or called auto tracking. Does that make? I mean, when you see it, Lynn, it's quite fascinating because you can literally stand there and watch this thing, especially if it's a dog running around the garden and you're using a wide-angled lens, and you'll see this dog running around and you'll see the auto tracking, which is often a different shaped box in a different color, following the animal around the garden. And you can just use a motor drive and press, and every image in theory should be clear.
What type of camera have you got in?
I've got a Nikon D7200.
I don't know, I'm not sure what it is. It's a Canon, it's AI Servo, it's called, but I don't know what it's called on Nikon.
You see it a lot with even on phone cameras where they've got the face recognition. If you have that turned on, it locks onto faces in the picture, and then as those faces move, so it follows them.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Graham. I was just going to say, this is not dissimilar to face recognition, which many phones have got. And of course, many modern cameras have got face. And in fact, some cameras have actually got eye recognition. And you can designate which eye, left eye and right eye. So, if someone's looking to the camera like that and you're shooting shallow at 1.2 with a prime lens, it will pick up, because obviously if someone's looking to camera like that with their head turned, you might only pick up one eye, and you may only want one eye, and you'd want the lead eye, and the camera could pick up the eye that's in the background, and it'd be blurred. So you're absolutely right, Graham. Face recognition is something which tracking is used for all the time.
Warren, I have a question.
Yes, David.
Is this the actual picture that you took, or have you cropped it? Can you remember?
I can't remember, David. I'd like to say I could, but I'm always honest.
Right,
I'm pretty sure I've cropped it. It's a full frame image.
It looks cropped.
I'm pretty sure
because of
it does look cropped. Yeah, it's almost certainly cropped.
Yeah. You say that you've given it an extra 1.5 stops exposure.
Yeah.
Surely, well, looking at this picture, the majority of the image is the dark uniforms. Yeah?
That depends on the crop, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it does. That's why I'm asking. This is why I'm asking. Because
no, I think it was because you can see by this guy on the left how tight it is to his arm. I used to crop tighter than I do now. I did this photo several years ago.
All right.
This isn't recent.
No.
And I can remember there was a lot of sky in this image and upper building. So you're absolutely right, David. The percentage of what it is that you are shooting and the angle of the camera, of course.
Yeah.
If you're doing this type of on-the-move street photography and the camera's angled, depends on your height as well, obviously. And if it's angled upwards and there's a lot of sky, then you're going to get a lot of dark subjects. I'm sorry to say, David, I'm looking at the work you post, you haven't played around a lot with this style of photography, have you?
I haven't played around with how you do it, no.
No. And I haven't, and I've played around a little with what you do. I'm nowhere near as good as you are. And as you can see, just within one genre or type of photography, there's so many different ways of skinning the cat, isn't there?
Yeah, sure.
Big time. But this is, I have to say, your style gives you a lot more keepers, David. It's very, very frustrating, this is.
All I wanted to say was, if this was predominantly white sky and the people were in the white sky, then fair enough, give it more exposure, because your camera will try and darken it down.
Yeah.
But if it's predominantly dark, you need to give it a decrease in exposure to keep the uniforms dark, because the camera will try and make them grey.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've never, though, had to, being that I always shoot this type of work with 28mm.
Yeah.
I'm not as close to these guys as you think I am, obviously, which is why, for me, I think it was a crop. I can't actually remember every shot I've taken. So obviously, with 28mm, I know I've never ever used minus. I've used minus on other things, but never on this style of photography.
All right.
But all I can say is get yourself if you haven't got a prime wide-angled lens, and most people use zoom. I mean, most people's lenses are zoom.
Yeah.
Then this is worth a bash, but you'll have to keep playing at it. It is pretty hard work, to say the least, but very gratifying when you get that special shot.
Yeah.
We call it a. I think I need a whiskey, to be honest. No, I think has anybody else got any more questions?
I was just going to say, you get an average of about 1 in 30.
Yeah, that would be a rough guess.
But when you think back, when we used to shoot slides, we used to think if we got a keeper that we could use for competition out of a roll of slides, that was, if we got more than that, we were lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, normally with photography, I don't think that for the landscapers amongst you, 1 in 30 would be a very good ratio, would it? Paul, would you say 1 in 30 was a good keeper ratio?
I would, yeah.
Really?
Mine would be pretty happy with 1 in 30.
Really?
Mine's around about 1 in 150, I should think.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It a lot depends on what quality you're looking for.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know,
I'm talking about not deleting it immediately. And
don't delete anything, then you can go back. Depending on your frame of mind, when you go back and visit your photographs, you can do something completely different with them.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I do,
We've done
Jeff.
during lockdown. No, you're absolutely right, Jeff. But if you see the disastrous street shots like this, there's not a hell of a lot you could do with them. Blurred, people's shoes, their belts, focused completely wrong. They are more disastrous, I would say, than the average poor landscape shot, just because of the way you're shooting them, of course.
Can't you use those?
Warren,
yes.
Do you use burst mode at all, or do you just do single shot?
No, with this camera, I just use single shot, but I can take 3, 4, 5 fairly quickly. But no, I don't use burst mode. No,
Okay.
No, but you could. Lynn?
Warren, I'm sorry. Can I just ask you, what was the sight on the camera? You said on that last, you said you wouldn't look through the focus.
I don't know whether, I'm assuming, perhaps Jeff or Chris or Paul can tell me. You said you had a Nikon, did you?
Yes.
Right. Is there any Nikon users in the house?
I don't think there are for your club. I think it's mostly Canon you've got, isn't it?
Yeah, we're all Canon. I take it it's a DSLR.
Yes, I'm assuming it is from the number.
So you're breaking up a bit.
Yeah.
I assume it's a DSLR, Lynn.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
a DSLR.
I've had no issue with mine shooting through the eyepiece on a DSLR. It's only the mirrorless can be a bit of a problematic with the electronic viewfinder.
Oh, I've got a sight on camera.
Sorry, I think Lynn was asking Jeff what I was referring to when I was referring to the Olympus EE sight that sits on
the sight. Yeah, that's it.
Yes. I don't know whether there's a Nikon. I'm assuming there's a Nikon Canon equivalent or there's a generic equivalent.
Generic ones, I think.
I just wondered what it was. What is it?
It's basically a very, very small little box that sits on the hot shoe that springs open, a spring lock. It springs up. There's a battery inside it. And then you have a screen sitting on top of the camera that actually generates, it looks like a laser. It's not a laser light, but it generates a circle inside the box, which you could clearly see in broad daylight, even in bright sunshine.
It's the Olympus E111 spot sight.
Sorry, is that for Olympus, David?
Yeah, it's the Olympus
Yes.
E111 spots.
Yes, yes.
It's about 99 quid.
Yeah, 99 quid. Yeah. We're just trying to work out whether Nikon has an equivalent.
I don't think we do.
I can send you the details of the Olympus, but that won't help you with a Nikon, obviously.
Yes, it works on any camera.
Oh, sorry, David. It works. Sorry, I couldn't hear you. It works on any camera.
Because you're aligning the centre of the spot sight. What you do to set it up is you set your tripod at the bottom of the garden.
Yeah.
You put your camera, you set something up at the top of the garden. You put your camera on a tripod. You line up the centre spot on your camera with the object. You then line up the centre of the object with the centre of the E111, and you're done. It's finished with it. It's over with it. Done.
Yeah, stupid of me. Of course, it would, in theory. Yes, of course, it should work with because it's got its own battery and power.
If you wanted to spend 25 quid, go to an astronomy site and get a Razor dot reader from there. They're just as cheap and just as economical and just as good.
Yeah.
What's the difference between that and live view then?
Oh, quite a substantial difference because
is that?
live view would need you to look either in the viewfinder or on the screen. And to do that, the camera's got to be quite close to you. So if an object's moving fast and you're using a long telephoto lens, you would very, very quickly lose where the object is. I'm sure if you've ever picked up a long lens or a telescope or binoculars to look at something, and for the first couple of seconds you can't actually find where it is.
Yes. All right, I see.
So if a bird's moving across you, you would find it very difficult to track the bird. That's why holding the camera out to arm's length and looking through this Olympus or whatever brand of sight, you can actually see the bird through the top of the camera, and the sight, as David said, you set it up with left and right calibration, which you have to do fairly regularly if you use the thing quite a lot, and you just track the animal or whatever it is at arm's length, which you can't do with a screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah,
So
thanks.
if you go on the Olympus website, you'll see it. And then if you go to Park Cameras or Wex or whoever, I think I bought mine on Amazon, actually. It was the cheapest. Yeah. Is it, David, did you say it was a E11, David?
Yeah, I think EW11, I think it is. I can't remember now. It's been so long since I used it, since this illness set in, Warren.
Yeah.
I'm not taking pictures for a year, basically.
Did you want a little break there, Warren?
Yes, please. Thank you. I'll come back next week. Yeah. Should we have, I'm going to make a cup of tea. Should we have a 10-minute break?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, right.
Lovely. Okay, thank you.
See you back at...
Yeah. So, oh dear. Oh, here. So we looked at that image, and this is the last image, a slightly slower image, someone moving towards me. One kid. This was in the Greenwich Market. And again, shot on the same camera, and I find that shooting on a 28 mil sort of camera with this camera's got a fixed lens, but I'd certainly recommend getting a small lens, prime lens, if you're going to try this type of work. And if anybody in the club is going to try this type of thing, and you want to have a chat, or you want to have a buddying, or sort of a one-to-one, or even arrange to go out, a few of us, and shoot, I'm more than happy to sort of, try and help organise something like that.
Right.
Bodyguard would be a good idea.
A bodyguard, yeah, absolutely. It is actually a good idea, Paul, to go out more than, it's like night photography, which I love doing, night street photography. It is better to have somebody with you, especially if you're going to use a tripod or something and do architectural work instead of street work. You could be standing there with a tripod at 1 o'clock in the morning in Brick Lane. It's not very safe. It really isn't. So going out.
Sometimes I found when I didn't go out without someone and fell over and bust my shoulder a bit.
Yeah, it is definitely worth going out two-handed. That's for sure. So let's move on to another style of street photography. And I would call, this is my own term, I call it waiting on the corner style. And the master of this technique was our own dearly beloved Alan Norris. I had the pleasure of shooting with him, and I know several of you have had that pleasure, sadly no longer, around Brick Lane. And he would be looking for something completely different to me. I was looking for moving objects that I could film, people, and Alan was looking for street furniture or graffiti or lighting hitting a building, and then just waited. So I'm moving all the time. With his style, he just then stopped. And would often stop for 20 minutes. Did you shoot with him, David?
I didn't, no, never.
Well, you didn't? Because I know Malcolm, is Malcolm with us tonight?
No, he doesn't seem to be.
No, he's not. That's a shame. Because Malcolm shot with him several times, and he would just wait. And Alan was a small chap, and looked completely, he just merged into the background. Literally, he made himself merge into the background, and he just wait for the right thing, the right person to pass, something that had caught his eye. And this is his work, which is just brilliant. He could have waited, I don't know how long he waited there for the right person at the right pace to come into that space. But this, of course, is a completely different style of street photography, and of course he's utilizing the abstract, that shape, that structure. So it's a very different style of photography. This is one of my favorite images of all time. I had to include it. And does anyone know where this was shot?
Yeah, the Millennium Bridge.
Correct. And he did need bravado to do this, because to stand under an open grate and shoot pictures upwards, you could be, you know, that is something. That is something you could certainly.
Your trousers on, but
it's okay. And knowing Alan, that's all he would have done was people like this. But I actually saw this a few months ago, and I'm thinking, I don't think I've got, excuse the term, the balls to stand there and wait for the right subject to come over it. But I just love that image. I just think it's absolutely brilliant.
Where is that?
That's the Millennium Bridge.
No, one at a time.
Yes. Go on.
Go.
It's the Millennium Bridge, David.
Oh, right, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And it's near. It's very close to where it meets the river itself, isn't it, Chris? I think.
It's the Tate. It's the Tate end.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where it splits into two walkways if you stand underneath it.
Right, I'll go down there then.
But I have to say, everything I've said about being, and I'm sure Paul's still with us, aren't you, Paul?
Which one? This
Oh,
one?
that one. Sorry, Paul Major. I'm sure everything I've said about shooting in public being legal, you'd have to be very, very careful about taking an image like this, as I'm sure Alan would be, obviously. But I love the image. It's one of my favourite images of all time.
Yeah, the previous shot is at St Paul. Is at Paternoster Square.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Because I used to work in Little Britain, so yeah. And another, again, I was with him, I think, when he took this. He just waited for the right person, and look at the expression of the graffiti against the guy eating the Cornish pasty, definitely a Cornish pasty. I mean, just amazing. And it's a very, very exciting form of photography. I took this image at the same time that he did, and I have to say his image is a lot better than mine. He had tremendous eye. Tremendous eye is a huge loss, to the club. And obviously we are organising an exhibition which hopefully will take place in October. Paul's booked the hall at Much Haddam, and that's going to be in memory of Alan, and an exhibition of his work, and obviously our work, and the families helped sort of donate towards that. So let's hope we can do that. I mean, you know, let's hope we get that opportunity.
Fingers crossed.
So,
Fingers
yeah,
crossed.
absolutely, absolutely. So moving on, a couple of excellent images by Chris with his permission. Again, using very, very strong light, strong available light, superb image. I think you put that in a contest, didn't you, Chris, recently?
Yeah, that's been shortlisted in Landscape Photographer of the Year 2020.
Brilliant image, great image. And another one of Chris's images. Would you like to say a few words about these, Chris? How you conceived them?
Yeah, so that one is at the Bloomberg building, which is near St Paul's. And I just saw the way the low winter light just created these long shadows, and I just like the way that one worked, really.
Did you wait for the right person, or did you ask?
I never wait for longer than about 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah,
I mean, that shot you just said of Alan's between the Paternoster Square, you can get that shot. It doesn't take very long. You just stand there and somebody walks past every minute. So
yeah, I think an image. I think this image would more than likely take longer.
That one, yeah, because you've got to get somebody eating. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to get something which the clown is shocked over. You know, this person eating the street or whatever.
Yeah.
But I can remember leaving Alan. There's an alleyway in Brick Lane with a lot of graffiti on it, and Malcolm and I left him there for at least 25 minutes. Did a long walk and came back, and he was still standing there waiting for the right person.
Yeah.
So it's as you can see, the complete opposite to what I do, which is sort of walking along, just shooting people rapidly.
Yeah.
And this image, Chris, was that just opportunistic or?
Yeah, that was on the South Bank. I just liked the really bright lighting gave us this sweeping curve, and S curve is always a nice thing to have in your picture. And then just waiting for people to walk across. You know, 3 or 4 people had already walked across, and then this was about the third one when I got the timing right.
Great image, really great image. Thank you. So moving on, to our last, not the last, my last this evening, street technique, observational. And in the case of these images, observational, because they're taken by our dear friend, Dave Hobbs, our recent annual PDI winner, with a street shot, or should I say a bus shot from what he said. And congratulations, David. Great work. This is, I think you'd agree, David, a lot safer style of photography. You don't really need quite as much bravado as wandering along shooting in people's faces.
You are right. My photography from the top of the bus is fairly safe.
Yeah.
Providing they don't look up at the window.
Yes, and the bus is moving. And the bus is moving
very slowly here. This was down, there's a music shop called Macari's, I think, down towards Trafalgar Square.
Right.
And the bus just stopped in the traffic for, a couple of minutes. And this occurred in front of, well, I was looking out the window. It just occurred below me on street level because I was on the top of the bus.
And
so,
you were using a long lens, I take it?
No, using my 24-105.
Oh, right, okay.
Standard zoom lens for the camera.
Yeah.
The only sad thing is it's not quite sharp because I'm shooting through bus glass and it's not.
You wouldn't think it doesn't look like you're shooting through glass.
No, it doesn't.
Well, I am. I am.
Yeah.
It's quite a successful method of photography because when you look down at street level, there is always, especially in this area, lots of things going on, and especially outside various tube stations where people meet and greet each other, and it's really quite surprising and a fairly simple way of getting images which are a bit different. And as Warren said, very wittily, observational. Yes, I like to observe people. And I've sat before in Trafalgar Square, out of the way, with a long lens, trying not to look as though I'm taking pictures. You just observe people going by, and when the right time comes, a bit like Alan, when the right time comes, you take a picture.
Yeah.
I could take 6 at a time. But I don't see the point. I'd rather track the person and take one picture and then move on to the next person. And this is what happens on the bus. The bus is moving. It will stop at a bus stop. You see something going on, take a picture.
Yeah.
Not always successfully. That's not mine, Warren.
That was on your website.
That is my picture. No.
No?
I don't know. Not mine.
Oh, right, okay. I thought I got it from your Flickr site.
No, you didn't.
I didn't, okay.
Oh,
what about that one?
That's one of mine, yeah, from the bus.
Do you want to comment on that one?
That one? That's very good.
It's a clever image, isn't it?
Very no problem with it, yeah.
Very clever image.
Yeah.
And this one here, taken on the street, I take it?
I was walking past, yes, and there was quite a lot of people and pigeons outside. I think this is the not the National Gallery, it's the church.
Martin's in the Field?
Martin's in the
Field.
Yeah,
Martin, it says St Martin's in the Field. Sorry, I didn't see that in the St Martin's in the Field. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's the one.
As well.
Yeah, there were some people up on the left-hand side, but this guy was on his own, looked a bit forlorn. And I thought, there's a picture there, so snap, and walked on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when I photographed, when I was up in Dundee, I photographed someone living on the street or begging on the street, and I actually went over and gave him some money, and said, "Do you mind if I take a photo?"
Yeah.
And they would normally say no. He actually gave me. I can't show you the image. He actually gave me a sort of thumbs up, and it's a really good image. I haven't got to that image yet. You'll see it one day. But I think with people that are sitting in the street or obviously looking to get money or whatever, then just offering them money and taking the shot doesn't have quite the same spontaneity, but at least you'll get a full facial of them as such.
Yeah.
Can He's probably just sitting there, bored out of his brains because his missus is taking so long in the shop.
Yeah, I think he's actually drinking. I think that. Oh no, it's a coffee, isn't it? He's drinking a coffee.
He's got coffee. He's got decent trainers.
Yes. Like the image we saw the other day, where we thought it was somebody sleeping in the street. He had a clean shirt on and looked like he'd just been pressed and washed.
You see, actually, this was taken, I remember now, with regards to the notice there in the left-hand corner about being marginalised and ignored. Because not only was he on his own, but the pigeons didn't go anywhere near him. They were all up the other end because somebody was chucking bread about. But it just, I think, what's the word I'm looking for? It just increased his loneliness because even the pigeons wouldn't go near him. It's just a bit odd.
Or you could say that he's in COVID. No, this is somebody in COVID while COVID's going on. And yet all the pigeons and all, so there's no distance between them, is there? And he is alone.
It's the pigeon on the right that's sort of looking round.
Yeah.
You know, hang on, how come they're all getting something and I'm being marginalised over here?
Yeah.
It comes right way back to what Warren said at the beginning, that it's telling a story and it's you're questioning things about it. Why it's a good photograph.
And this is so we've sort of very quickly gone through 3 different styles of street photography. All started from custom settings and James Popsis. Thank you, James. But there are many other styles of street photography. One of the observational styles, which I won't show you, but is to get people moving around public areas or stations and shooting it at very slow speed. So you get that sort of blur and you get that sort of mosaic. There are so many styles of street photography. If you buy books or look at magazines or look at Flickr, and there are so many groups on Flickr. I have to say on Flickr, most of the street photography is not of this standard. It's quite poor. But a lot of people just walk down the street and take pictures of anything, people's backs, their sides, shop windows, and they just post it onto one of the street photography Flickr sites, of which there are hundreds. You don't see a lot of good work of this, of this style. You actually wonder why they take them. But
Warren, I think you started off by showing us images that all had people in them.
Yes.
Maybe some people think that street photography is about photographing streets. I don't know.
Yes.
But this kind of photography, you've got to have people in it. Otherwise, there's no point to it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And you've got to have technique, as you're showing, David, and hopefully some of the other images I showed, Chris's images and Alan's and my own. You've got to understand the technique. You've got to practice. You've got to have the nerve to go and do it. Because even a shot like this, the guy could have turned around and said to you, "Excuse me, what the hell are you doing?"
Yeah, you could do. Yeah. I had that I had that in the town centre last week or whenever it was, when the shops first opened, and there was a large queue outside the sports shop. I forget which one it was. I posted a picture on Flickr.
Oh yes.
Right? And I took one picture from the front of the queue, looking back, looking down, and I went up to the other end of the queue and took a picture the other way. And there was a woman, and she was with some chap, and she started having a go at me about, what are you taking a picture of? I don't want my picture taken, blah, 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 blah. So I went up towards her and I said, look, I'm sorry that you don't like me taking your picture, but I'm afraid you are standing in a public place and I can actually take a picture of the queue. It's not of you. And I suggest that if you really don't like it, the police station is down there and we'll go over there and discuss it with them. And she shut up and I walked off. But, you never know what you're going to be confronted with.
No.
If somebody takes offence.
And would you get that with landscape photography, eh? How many trees have argued with you?
No, I don't think so.
No. I've seen some pretty big
Another photographer, maybe.
Absolutely.
Warren?
Yes.
Would you say, because I mean, I must admit that these last talks where you've done about the street photography has actually I really do fancy having a go. Trouble is, I don't go anywhere to take, pictures. So, but would somewhere like Stortford or Harlow, would you get the same sort of opportunity as what you do in London? Or is it a lot easier in London because it's bigger and busier and...
Well,
and people want to remain anonymous.
Yeah, you'd stand out more, Heather, because obviously there may be less people. So and filming in a crowd is always good because you get lost and they don't see you doing it. Characters, of course, you're going to see more characters around Brick Lane, the East End, South Bank than you are possibly going to see in Stortford. But I have seen lots of pictures taken locally by some of our members, I think. I'm sure there was one outside of a building society.
Yeah, that's mine.
That's yours, isn't it, David?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. So there are opportunities locally, and certainly, Heather, from what you said before, you haven't done much of this type of thing.
I haven't done any of it.
Well, then practicing locally would just be fantastic. And it will take, it depends on which style you want to go for, and you may want to mix and match. But if you want to go for the moving style, you are going to need a lot of practice. Unless you are incredibly fortunate. It took me months to start to get just clear images of something that was relevant with the body parts in the right place, if you know what I mean, and not just a blurry mess.
I must admit, the Dave Hobbs and the Alan Norris style is what excites me most.
Yes, well, that's very observational, and you need a good sense of shape and perspective, and I suppose they're opportunistic by the fact that you've got to find those shapes, you've got to find that graffiti, that street furniture, that then you've got to have some sort of imagination as to what will fit well photographically. And with your enormous experience, Heather, I wouldn't have thought that would be particularly difficult. And then you wait, and no one's going to turn around to a woman of mature years and say, excuse me, why are you waiting on the corner or sitting there, whether you've got a camera or...
I'm earning a crust.
Sorry?
I'm earning a crust.
Exactly. No, go for it. It's lovely weather. People won't ask you anything. No, they certainly won't. I at 6'2", I'm the one that people say, excuse me, what are you doing? As I said, I've never had a problem on the street itself. You have got to be careful. Obviously, if you saw somebody like David did, I don't know if you would have taken that shot, David, actually in the street of a drug deal going on.
I very much doubt it, no.
Very much doubt it. You could be in serious, someone could demand the camera from you. And whether it's legal what you're doing or not, they could still demand the camera.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Or grab it from you.
Yeah.
So you would need to be, but if you're just filming things like this guy here with his coffee, I think you'd have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. Very different to your genius of macro insect work, Heather.
That's what I mean. Something totally different.
I'm just waiting.
I'm let out on the 1st of August.
Yeah.
They're not letting me out till then.
Right. Well, it's not long to go. Well, I'm waiting. Would you believe? I'm going in the opposite direction. Olympus is sending me a 60mm macro 2.8 lens and an STF 8 flash, which has 2 arms to it. Actually poke round the lens, allowing you to do the sort of work that you're brilliant at, which is insect photography, which I've never really done. But I thought I'd have a bash.
It's a doddle.
Well, I will hopefully agree with you but after I get this equipment, if I get it.
Well, they don't jump up and shout at you and ask what you're doing.
They might sting you though.
No.
They'll be fine. Is there any other questions or anything that we've raised or discussed? Not just me, but all the people that have collaborated and contributed, which I thank you all for. Is there anything that we've said that people don't understand or think, what the hell are they talking about, or need any further? If anyone needs any further help in any of these aspects, then I know that the committee and many other members are more than happy to help and advise, and just drop us a line and we will make sure that somebody buddies up with you and we can move you forward. And that's what evenings like this are all about, obviously.
Yeah, that'd be really good actually. I keep forgetting about the Tuesday in the day, so I've got to set a reminder. You know, you do that online.
Lynn, they're all on YouTube anyway. They're all on our YouTube channel.
Sorry, you broke up.
They're all on our YouTube channel if you want to watch them afterwards anyway.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. There's a link in the newsletter.
Well, that's me done. I think I've exhausted myself. Exhausted you.
Well done, Warren.
Can I just make an observation, Warren?
Yes, of course.
Can you stop sharing your screen, Warren?
Yes, of course. Sorry.
No, it's all right. Just
yeah. There we go.
Just what I was going to say was you've mentioned several things there, custom settings and focus tracking and various things, and we've all, well, all right, there's quite a number of Canon users, but there's Olympus and Fuji, etc. What I was going to say was always keep your instruction manual handy, because I know whenever I want to change custom settings, I can never remember how to do it. So I always have to go back to the instruction manual. And it's just an observation. We've been talking about how to set your camera up. So yeah, just reminding people that there is an instruction manual. It'll either be a hard copy or it'll be online somewhere.
Yeah, so this is the Canon EOS R. As you see, it's about 3/4 of an inch thick. 10 pages are dedicated in English to the camera. The rest are all in foreign languages.
Yeah, that's normal, isn't it, Jeff? So you've got to do what Paul said, which is basically download. In fact, I said to Olympus this week, I was talking to them, and I said you really should do a search engine, because their catalogue for their manual for my camera is 323 pages, all in English. So finding anything, there's a very good menu at the beginning, but you've got to scroll down forever. It could take you 5 minutes to find the article.
It's a PDF. You just Control F.
No, it's not. It doesn't. There is no search engine on it, Chris.
It is. It's a PDF, because the OM5 is a PDF document. If you do Control F, if you do Control F,
right,
then you get a little search box come up in the top right-hand corner. You can type in there what you want to search for. Hit return.
Control F.
Yes.
Yeah.
Super.
F5.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. There you go.
Warren, I got myself a printed version of it.
Yes, yeah, and you can buy lots of books.
They're available. There's a printed version of the official Olympus manual online. You can buy it online. Doesn't cost a lot.
Yeah. Gordon got one. I think it cost him £5.
Right.
And it's been worth every penny.
Yeah, because you can put post-it notes in pages, and it's so much easier to use a printed manual over a PDF manual on a computer screen.
Yeah. What did our newer members think of an interactive chat like that? Did they find that useful or helpful or instructive?
Oh yeah, really good.
Very good.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting.
Rather, switched off and nobody can speak. Yeah, I much prefer this.
Right.
As long as everybody isn't talking at once, everybody seems to do that, don't they? Here, so it's good.
Yeah.
So it's really been useful.
I mean, we've got a blank evening coming up, July, haven't we? So maybe we can then do a question and answers thing then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That might be an idea.
Good idea. Yeah.
Do you go out much together? Do you meet up in these evenings? I mean, I know we haven't because of COVID, but do you usually do that?
We did last summer. We had a great time wandering around Much Haddam and meeting some of the local personalities.
Yeah.
So we did a couple of sessions in the church, and yeah.
Yep.
I'm
Forest.
Chris organised. I'm trying to.
Maybe a fun guy to be found in Epping Forest.
Oh dear. It's something actually that is quite good, and the more we could do of those sort of outings, the better.
Yeah, we're looking at organising some for August, for the Thursday nights in August.
That'd be good if we're allowed out.
Yeah.
Right.
You can socially distance, and as long as we're all standing, you know,
You can meet up with groups of 6.
2 meters of each other, it's be fine.
Yeah, you can meet 6 people, can't you, at the moment?
Yeah, and just have 3 groups of 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Correct. Absolutely. Always a solution. 3 groups of 6.
Program, right? Only do solutions.
Absolutely. Brilliant idea. Absolutely brilliant. Alan's not with us this evening.
No, there are a few people tonight. But I mean, to be honest, it's so hot. I'm sure lots of people just
boiling.
Yeah.
It's still hot.
Right. So, well, thank you very much, Warren.
Pleasure.
Yeah, there was. I know you put a lot of work into that, and you had lots of fun with technology and things like that, trying to get it to do what you wanted. But you took us on an interesting adventure. You started off with this idea of the figure ground, and then on to the world of street photography. And it was quite nice for everybody to get to have a chat about various subjects and just shout stuff out and the way they work. I think it's always interesting just to find out how other people see the art of photography, as it were. So thank you very much for that. And can we all give him a round of applause?
Thank you very much.
Well done, Warren.
Really enjoyed it. And thank you so much for joining in and adding all your points and your questions and everything else. And perhaps we'll do something else in the future.
Great.